We're at war with the most dangerous enemy that has ever faced mankind in his long climb from the swamp to the stars. And it's been said if we lose that war, and in so doing lose this way of freedom of ours, history will record with the greatest astonishment that those who had the most to lose did the least to prevent its happening.
Arena Radio.
Now let's set the record straight. There's no argument over the choice between peace and war, but there's only one guaranteed way you can have peace, and you can have it in the next second. Surrender.
Obstructionism.
There's a time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all.
Hello and welcome to Arena Radio, the battlefield of ideas. My name is Chris Pilier. Just, obviously a lot of us right now are watching the news, and we're seeing this terror unfold in Connecticut. And, one of my favorite things to do, just in general, is to observe and kind of take things in from a grand perspective. And I do so on things like Twitter, look at different news agencies and media outlets, Facebook, different, all kinds of different places, talking to people. And I try to understand things, and that's just, I guess, my nature. And, of course, Arena Radio and the Battlefield of Ideas is one of my outlets. I have Facebook accounts, or a Facebook account with a lot of different pages, and where I have discussions, and a lot of those discussions are taking place in order to understand. And I'm not different than, not any different than many people. Maybe I'm a little more outspoken about my ideas than others. But for the most part, we are all trying to figure things out. And in the event, or during an event like we're experiencing right now, with this tragedy in Connecticut, we're all hyper-focused on the media and Facebook and Twitter, and we're kind of just watching people's reactions, as well as trying to get the latest information, the latest news. And we're all, hypersensitive to every piece of information that comes out. And of course, we always want to know why. Why does something like this take place? And, us as human beings, we try to solve problems. That's what we do. We see things out there, we try to solve problems. A lot of us, have opinions about why things happened and speculate, and the media does the same. And what ends up happening during a situation like this is I think people's humanity comes out. And a lot of that is confusion. People are confused. They're trying to understand. And something like this really, truly breaks people from their foundation. And I'm not speaking of the foundation of what makes us who we are, but the foundation of what life really is. And, I try to put things in perspective when I make decisions, or I, have opinions on things. And what I gain from a lot of this, personally, is that first and foremost, we're all individuals, and we're all alone. And I say that, and it kind of may come out kind of weird, but we are all alone. And in a situation like this, we're disjointed from our humanity, I believe, because we just can't understand or can't relate to this type of horror. And so many of us grasp for faith in our humanity. And the more that things like this happen, the more disjointed we become. And with being disjointed, comes, the loss of our sensitivity. And I say our sensitivity, this particular situation is something that has never happened in American history that we know of, where a man is going into, or a young man is going into a school and shot up a bunch of kindergartners. And, we've had school shootings before. And it seems like the more that we get, the less sensitive we become. If you watch over the next couple of days, the news will shift from this story to another story. And those shifts are driven by the desires and the demands of people. And, of course, all of this is very esoteric and very, nebulous. This whole, idea of, what takes place during these events. But we can really learn a lot about ourselves, and we can learn a lot about just life in general. Not only how valuable life is and people are in our family, but it can also put us in a position to really become human again. Because as we become disjointed from our so-called humanity, when something like this happens, we scramble back towards it. And people, tend to not be as biased. They tend to not be as insensitive. Because we all understand that we're going through a rough time. All of us are hypersensitive, and we're more or less trying to look out for each other and trying to comfort each other. And whenever I see something like this happen, I try to talk things out to try to understand them. But I think one of the hardest things to do, or maybe even some of the wrong things to do, is to try to understand them. Because how can you relate to a man going into a school and shooting a bunch of children? You just can't. And over the course of the next couple weeks, next month, couple months, there'll be people that are trying to dig into this killer's mind and try to figure out ways to prevent this type of scenario. And all of it, it's for good reason. We all want to try to not prevent this type of tragedy or horror. Tragedies probably doesn't explain enough. So trying to understand this, I think, is really what is where we go wrong. And then often when we try to understand something, we try to make human someone that has act like an animal. There's no other way to put it. Rational human beings don't do what this person did. And for us to try to understand this person or try to get answers, it's human nature. We want to figure things out to try to prevent them. But as if this isn't going to happen again, hopefully it doesn't happen again. But to think that it's not going to happen again is somewhat naive. And of course, this brings up a whole nother, slew of questions. Like, what do you do? And that'll be, of course, that the politics will shift in that direction. Well, what do you do? Some will want to ban guns. Some will want to force people to, and I've already seen this on the news, where force people to go to an emergency room if they have some kind of some kind of psychiatric meltdown in an office of a psychiatrist or psychologist. These psychologists and psychiatrists, they have people come in their offices and open up to me. Tell me what you're thinking. And then these people tell them what they're thinking, and now we're going to debate on whether or not we should take these people and force them to go to a hospital. The answers to all these questions are an individual question. We all must look inside of ourselves and realize one thing, that every single one of us is capable of doing what this person did. And I know there's probably people on the other side of these comments that I'm making here that are saying, oh, absolutely, there's no way. Think about it. We're all capable of doing very horrific things. But what keeps us from doing horrific things? Well, we're first of all rational. We realize that, well, I don't want to do things bad to people because I don't want bad things to happen to me. Some people have their faith. And that is really where the deficit is in our culture. And we have, everybody's got a way to fix that, whether it's, you join this church or that church, or you have to go out and do sports or keep yourself busy. There's all these different antidotes for keeping yourself sane or keeping yourself from doing bad things. But it all boils down to that we're all capable of doing this thing. We're all capable of doing what this man did. And, when things like this happened, I looked into myself and I realized that I'm a human being capable of doing very bad things. And when I realize that helps me say, okay, what do I need to do to shore myself up to prevent this type of thing from happening? And, so you got to look inside of yourself, and you got to realize, there's things that we all do that have prevented us from doing these horrible things, and that's where the answer is. Now, unfortunately, all of us have individual answers or individual ways of dealing with our animalistic nature. We all are animals. We're all, people that are capable of doing animalistic things. And our upbringing, our foundation in our faith or our spirituality, culture, has put these barriers in place, or norms in place, or taboos in place to prevent us from doing things that are unacceptable. So when we look for answers to why this has happened, we'll never come to the conclusion. And to continually try over and over and over and over again to somehow psychoanalyze this killer's mind only does really one thing, is lift this person up to the place where they want to be. When this person walked into that school, armed like a soldier, walked into a room full of children, innocent children, and started pulling the trigger, that person, in some sick way, was dealing with something inside of his soul. And for us to mention his name, post his pictures, talk about him on the news endlessly throughout the rotation, all of those things put him in a place where he wanted to be. Because anybody that has a soul as empty as this person is looking for any type of anything to fill up that void. You have to be soulless in order to kill children with a semi-automatic weapon and a couple of pistols. Anybody that kills anyone has to be soulless, has to have no love in their heart, has to have no future in mind. They have to be an animal at nature, because human beings don't do these type of things. So, I think, it's very sad to see in our culture that people are trying so hard to try to figure out who this guy was. And, if you tried to, look on Twitter, you're going to see this guy's name in hashtags more than you will see the principal's name. In fact, I don't know who the principal was. I think the principal was killed. I don't know any of these names, but I've already heard who this guy was and his name over and over. They got the names wrong. Everybody's trying to figure out who's the killer, who is the killer, who is the killer. In which we want to make sure there's justice served. But leave that to the law enforcement. Leave that to the police. Let them handle that. It's you can't. There's nothing you can say or do to help these people get through this. They have to get through it themselves. Because just as I'm looking inside of myself to try to figure out ways to understand the situation, they're going to do the same thing at 100 times the intensity. It's a lot more personal to them, obviously, because they've been directly affected by this. So, I just thought it was very, very important for me to say what I feel about it. This is what I do. When I have a thought about something, I like to talk about it out loud, think about it out loud. And it's been weighing on me ever since we first got news of that this morning. In that, like the other events, Virginia Tech, Columbine, just recently the mass shooting in Colorado, also just recently this kid in Oregon that shot up that mall. Every time that happened, and my first thought is that person was struggling with something that he just couldn't reconcile. He couldn't reconcile his evil feelings. And for people that out there don't believe in God or don't believe in a higher power, or they don't believe in evil, or if you want to put a name to it, the devil or Satan or whatever you want to call it, that's it right there. We've witnessed it. There is nothing more evil than killing innocent children. And every single one of us out there, in some way or another, can relate to this. And I say not relate to the tragedy, but we can relate to the family aspect of it. We all know a kindergartner, or we all know a young child, and we try to somehow understand this by putting a face on the people that have been tragically affected by this, or even put a face on these children that have been killed. Sometimes we look at our own kids and we say, that could have been you. All this was taking place, my son was at school. My first thought was, a protective, fatherly feeling. My first thoughts and feelings were, instantly I wanted to go find out and make sure my son was okay. As irrational as that may be, because this is, 1,000, 1,500 miles away, that was my immediate thought, because that is the human nature of being a father, is being protective of their child. So in dealing with this, I think that the best way, at least for me to deal with this, and I would suggest others, is to look inside of yourself and realize that we're all human beings, we're all individuals, but we are also all capable of doing things that are horrendous. And horrendous is a relative word. Cheating on a spouse can be horrendous. It may not have the national impact that this particular event has had, but it can be horrendous. Because the effects of that particular act could have profound effects on a person's life. Who knows what went through this person's mind? But it could have been some type of transgression from previous things in his life that may have been something as tragic as a divorce. So when I say that we're all capable of doing this, it means more than just us actually pulling the trigger. It means that everything that we do has a profound effect on other people around us. So when we say ugly things or we do ugly things, all of those things echo through society. What is acceptable? Obviously this is not an acceptable situation. None of us, there's not a person in this country that has any type of soul that would think that this is acceptable. And I think too often people they're afraid to say anything. I get behind this microphone because I feel like it's my duty. I feel like it's my duty to say things out loud. People all the time see bad things taking place and they just walk by. I mean, how many times do you see, like in New York, somebody gets stabbed and people just walk by this person and he dies and bleeds in the street? What have we become? What have we become? Murders have been taking place for years, centuries. They're going to continue. But do we make it acceptable? Have we become so desensitized by all the things that we see around us in the news, in the movies, on the video games, that a murder is it's another chalk line? Is it just another piece of information that we see that runs across our Twitter feed or our Facebook feed? When we hear it in the news, is it just background noise? I mean, that's really where the problem is. And all of that resides within ourselves. At what point do we speak about things that we believe in? At what point do we meet on the battlefield of ideas, as I call it, and call it whatever you want? That at what point do we talk about what's right and what's wrong? At what point do we take a stand? At what point do we say, no, that's wrong, instead of, oh, well, it's just wrong for me? At what point do we stop? At what point do we stop accepting things and becoming cowards in our way of dealing with things? I've been there. And in often many cases, I'm still there. I guess I'm a little brave to get out here and talk and hear myself talk in some cases. Because I feel like sometimes I talk to people and they just don't listen. They don't hear what I'm saying. They don't engage. They think, oh, well, there he goes, go rambling again. I'm trying to reach people, as are many people. I'm not the only one. There's many people out there like me. And some people do it in different ways. They do it through their church, or they do it through their community, or they actually engage in politics, or they go to the soccer game with their kid and they talk to the other parents and they discuss things. That is where it takes place. That is where the rubber meets the road. Us allowing our kids to do things that they shouldn't do is the things that lead to mass tragedy. one of the hardest job that I have in my life is bringing up my son, especially with the internet, television, obviously me growing up as a boy, the trouble that I got in when I was a kid, little stupid stuff. I mean, nothing serious, but I understand what these kids are faced with, but they are actually much more, engaged in media and things that are coming at them, and they're being desensitized by all this stuff. I don't think we should go out and ban things like video games that have violence in them or ban movies. That's not the way to do it. Those things exist to make us better parents, to make us loving parents. When my son wants to play Black Ops at 12 years old and shoot up a bunch of people, my first thoughts are, it's just a game. But my fatherly thoughts are, he's not old enough to do that type of thing, and maybe never should be able to do that. I've done it before. I've shot up things on these games, and it can be fun, but at 12 years old, no. There's other games out there for them to engage in and have fun with, and obviously it's a social culture with the children, the kids. They want to do things together. Well, that's a part of parenting. Us parents having to decide what's the best environment for our children to exist in. What movies we let them watch. What's on television. What music we listen to. That's one of the hardest things that I do. I'll listen to a lot of different types of music. And sometimes, the curse words or the rated R nature of some of this music that we listen to, that's even on just regular terrestrial radio. Sometimes you just got to turn it off. Regardless if they're in the back playing a video game, it's getting into that little mind. And just as we're capable of doing very horrible things, these children one day could grow up to do horrible things. And this is more than just politics. This is more than just, responsibility as a community. This boils down to the individual. This boils down to the family. This affects us all. And until we stand up and start talking out against things that are inappropriate and communicating with our neighbors, our kids, friends, parents, and communicating and trying to get on the same page and try to nurture our kids' souls, we'll never turn this ship around. We'll always be headed in this direction. And it all lies in the soul. Everything that we talk about, everything that we see out there is decisions that people make. This person that killed all these children woke up this morning and said, you know what? I want to go shoot a bunch of kids. I have a reason to do this. There's something in my mind that's making me think that I need to do this. That is a reality. And there's nothing that we could have done to stop that at that point. It got to that point because somebody let him get there. Something happened in this person's mind and where people around him didn't reach out. They didn't want to go and say, hey, dude, what's going on, man? What's going on in that head of yours? Why did you just say that? That was very hurtful. Or, hey, let's talk. Hey, I'm Dad. I'm going to put this remote down for a few minutes and let's just talk. Those are the things that make those things not happen. Reaching out to our kids and our friends and our family and understanding what's going on and talking and raising the red flags when they need to be raised. That is really where things happen. This morning was too late. There was no stopping this person. Somebody was going to die today in that guy's mind. And he was hoping a lot of people. He was armed to kill a bunch of people. And the political people will come out, people with a motivation. Whatever that motivation is, we can debate that all day. But there will be people that will come out and say, you know what, if we would have just not allowed him to have those guns, he wouldn't have done this. When on the same day, 22 people were stabbed to death in China. So, when somebody comes out and says something stupid, like guns caused this, it is our responsibility to say, no, an evil person is what caused this. Or the people around this person didn't raise the flag. The people that are around this person, they're all thinking that. What could I have done? They're all devastated. I can imagine what's going through these people's minds. I just saw this kid last week. I could have done something. Hey, that was my buddy. And he said something to me and I didn't think anything of it. Because it was normal. So at what point does killing become normal? It's a lot more normal now than it used to be. Whether or not it happens more now than it did before is debatable. But we see a lot more of it now. Because we have this flow of information. Constant flow of information. Round-the-clock news. Facebook, Twitter, all these, hundreds of different news outlets that bombard us with things and desensitize us. The only thing human out there in the media is places like Facebook and Twitter, because we actually see what people truly think and feel. It's not all produced and fabricated to push an agenda or something. And I think that places like Facebook and Twitter, they're great places to go and engage with people that you don't engage with very often. And look, I'm just as guilty of this as anybody. But we spend a lot of time on these things, and we be disconnected from our humanity. They become us. Facebook and Twitter become our personalities. They become a projection of what we want to be in some cases. How many times do you have a buddy that takes a picture and they go to post it and you're like, oh, don't post that picture. Why? Because we're trying to protect ourselves and our image. Happened to me. Happens to everybody. Anybody listening to me and has a Facebook page, they know exactly what I'm talking about. Why? Well, it's something that we're missing there. So this isn't the typical conversation I normally have, but I think it does fit well in the discussion of ideas, because I think that we have ideas that can help better prevent some of these type of tragedies or horrors. There's things that we can do, and they're simple things. They're little bitty insignificant things. Talking to our kids. Talking to our neighbors, talking to our family. Human things. Instead of posting on someone's page, go see them. Or if you're going to post things that are positive. And there's people listening right now that's saying, Chris, you don't always post positive things. I don't always have positive things to say. But it's important when somebody's going through rough times to console those people. And to try to reach out to them. Do the neighborly thing. That's what's missing. That's what's going on here. This person that did this, that killed all these children and these teachers, got to the point where there was no turning back. He knew he was going in there and wasn't coming out alive. He was taking his last stand. And he was responsible for that. He was responsible at the end of the day, he was responsible for what he did. But there's a lot of people that were in direct contact with this person that if every single one of them would have just done one little thing, may have prevented this. All of us look around and we have some kind of guilt from this. We feel guilty in some way. It's hard to figure out. You know, for me it was, God, I'm happy my son's okay. You know, I felt guilty about that after. It's like, man, I'm happy. I'm happy on a day when so many are sad. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with being happy that my son's okay. And there's also nothing wrong with feeling a little guilty. So, I guess if there's anything that I can say and leave you with is that take some extra time, and I'll do the same, to reach out to people and not just leave things unsaid. We have a responsibility to our society to talk out and speak out when things are wrong. It may not be behind a microphone. It may be within art. It may be within common discussions at the soccer game. And there's nothing wrong with that. We shouldn't discourage it. So many people don't want to hear the discussions. They just want everybody to just have their own opinions and that's it, and not discuss what's right and wrong. There's nothing wrong with having the stance that is opposed to mine, but I'm going to come out and talk out against things that I don't believe in. But at least have a stance. Don't just sit there and watch. Be a participant in culture. Be a participant in determining what's right and wrong. If you just sit by and let things go by and just leave me alone, I just want to live my life. You know, I see too much of that. It bothers the crap out of me. You know, people that have opposing views to mine, those are the people that I want to engage with. Because I'm going to learn from those people. You know, I have a lot of people that I have a lot of agreement with, that I'm connected with, whether it's through, all these social media sites or just organizations I'm involved in. Those are not the people that I'm learning anything from. I mean, I learn a little bit here and there, some new sides and parts and pieces of my particular belief system. But I don't want to preach to the choir. I mean, I don't want to preach in general, but if I'm going to have a discussion to determine whether or not something's right or wrong, I definitely want to engage people that have opposing views to me in order to be able to make my mind out or just embolden my position. You know, it's great and cute to post pictures of things and, to just live life, but at some point we have to engage. We have to talk about things. And talk about things that have substance. Life's tough. Work's tough. We go to work and we spend all day trying to figure stuff out and solve problems, and we get home. Sometimes we just want to turn on the boob tube and melt into the sofa and into a bag of chips or cookies or whatever. Drink a drink. I love doing that. Come home and get a nice cocktail and just relax. But we gotta try to better society, and we don't do that by just cowering behind insignificant sound bites or insignificant comments. Actually trying to go out and solve issues, solve problems is really what makes a difference. And all of us have a way of doing it. So, it's a very sad day in America, and let's all take an opportunity. This is an opportunity to look inside ourselves and see what we can do to make this place better. Thank you for joining me today. My name is Chris Pielier with Arena Radio, and we've been on the battlefield of ideas.